Disco Elysium is one of the best games ever made. That statement, being generally non-controversial, is testament in itself. A legacy that zaum champions absent some of the folks that made it happen in the first place. We'll discuss specifics later, of course, but a stained legacy can become a curse. That curse has been festering in the dark for a long while, and it's been rotten luck for their follow-up title, Zero Parades for Dead Spies, an espionage thriller non-sequel taking inspiration from a game that used to be squarely theirs, now disputed by a flurry of sentiment that is painfully misguided, righteous, biased. Par for the course is all I can say for sure. But a video game is more than the controversy it spawns, more than those who created it, and certainly more than those involved in the situation I'm admittedly being pretty vague about. So look, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm not just gonna add to the wave of articles, YouTube videos, or Steam reviews condemning the game itself for zaum's mistakes, not the insurmountable challenge that is a comparison to Disco Elysium either. And I'm certainly not the type to cover my eyes and ears to ignore it all. In fact, I've decided to give a separate verdict for all three. A review cut clean from all that taints Zero Parades for Dead Spies. A review when compared to Disco Elysium, as scary as that may be, and a review in light of what the fuck actually happened over at zaum. All in one video. Zero Parades for Dead Spies is headed by Herschel Wilk, alias Cascade, a brilliant covert operative for the Supreme Union of Proletarian Republics, or the Superbloc, or, well, communism. The year is 96, like 0096, not 1996 or 2696. I don't think I ever found out how far forward or backward the game is set relative to our world. Anyhow, it is 96 years post the end of history, as this era is called, marked by the signing of the La Tour-Woolgar Treaty. This is a signed legal agreement between three dominant factions: the communist superbloc, as we've established, the more liberal to neoliberal investment bank turned international power EMTER, and the techno-fascist Illuminated Empire, or La Luth. It basically says, you know, let's not have any more open conflict. Presumably an ongoing war was far more trouble than it was worth, and they could at the very least agree on that. The important part is that the rivalry still remains. The war is still ongoing, but in the shadows, in encrypted transmissions and smoke-filled rooms, and those living in this era will be none the wiser. Now, Cascade is newly thought out from the Freezer, which is a scary, or less scary, way to say she was relegated to a cubicle in a big office because she fucked up big time in theater. Operating once again on the island city-state of Portofino, she is tormented by her past mistakes to the point of full dissociation. This is the game's way of justifying why they can call her brilliant and still give the player some sense of progression by way of collecting and reforming her shattered psyche however they wish. Herschel isn't an amnesiac, but certain experiences have been repressed to better cope with the mess she made, so she knew almost as little as I did going in, and we were to uncover Portofino's mysteries together. I know I said otherwise, but there are some comparisons that are inherent, that can't be avoided in this part of the video, so I'm going to assume you understand the way Disco Elysium handles character progression and go from there. It is essentially the same. Her mind is fractured, and it is on the player to choose which spy-flavored brain crumbs to gather. Be it shadow play, the operant, the spy, and the skill to be one. Blueprints, perception, the city and how well she understands it, or maybe entanglement, her connection to the stars, the cosmos, and whatever paths that may unlock. There are a total of 15 skills that make Herschel Wilk, and as expected, they all like to chime in whenever they can, and you know, they're not all as personable as I'd like them to be individually, but that's not to say their contribution isn't very welcome. For me, she couldn't tell a wrench from a supercomputer, but would surely hold her own under the knife. You could make her a socially awkward conspiracy nut, or the charismatic idiot spy. There's quite a bit to work with here. Like any RPG, skills determine the character's success in action or conversation. But in this one, I had a risky lever to pull if I couldn't stand to fail a check. You see, Herschel has to manage her fatigue, anxiety, and delirium, lest she cause permanent damage to herself, meaning I had to sacrifice an entire level if one of the three reached its limit. As you might have noticed, each status effect is color-coded, and if you guessed correctly, they correspond to the 5 skills in that same color. Now, if you remember, I hinted at a way you can avoid failing a check. Herschel can exert herself to raise the chance of success in any given dice roll, but the unfortunate catch is that it comes at the cost of raising one of these 3 status effects. I definitely thought this would become pretty annoying pretty quick, but it ended up adding another layer to every decision I made. You know, do I push myself to make damn sure I get what I want here and risk not having the option later, perhaps at the cost of a level somewhere down the line? Thankfully, I had the option to do just so many drugs. It was a dream come true. Each main class of drug will lower one status and raise another. For example, a beer might lower anxiety by 2 and raise delirium by 1. This and the fact that dialogue even outside of checks can raise these ailments created a really nice push and pull that complexified the gameplay loop. I had to put a little more thought into my choices, and it's not so frustrating in a way that cost me a level at every turn. To be honest, I don't think I lost a single level beyond the unavoidable instance in the tutorial. I did come close though. So, you'll notice earlier I said the word action. And that's not really something you expect in a game like this, but it'd be a pretty shitty espionage game if there wasn't a little bit of action. Zaum felt the same clearly. So in certain scripted scenarios, time will slow to a crawl, an almost Spidey sense-like effect will overtake the screen, and Cascade will weigh up her response to the danger. This is probably the most interesting addition to the game, if a little underused. Somehow they managed to make it feel like a scene from a spy thriller every single time, and it never ever got old. Some of the cooler examples of this are positioned pretty late in the game. I don't want to spoil you, so you'll have to take my word for it, but I hope other games take inspiration here, if anywhere else. Sure, look, I get it. Seeing the number in the nice font go up is enough for most people, but that isn't the only way to strengthen her mind, body, and maybe it's a tiny spoiler, but literally her soul in this game. There are 2 additional avenues to explore. The first, and the most interesting, is conditioning, which allowed me to more explicitly influence Herschel's personality. These ideas and thoughts are free to equip and can be switched out with a 12 in-game hour cooldown for the condition that was just given up. Though I wanted more than just 2 slots and had to fork out a skill point for each extra one. If you go against one of them, for example, saying nothing as a dialogue response while being the kind of person that'd never fucking shut up, will violate it, and Herschel will lose any and all benefits, sometimes with additional penalties. The caveat being that it's mostly not super difficult to avoid violating them. Some are pretty rough though. I think it's understated how much these affect your gameplay moment to moment, and it's hard for me to say after a single 30-hour playthrough, but it was always fun to experiment with them. The second avenue is a simple one. Clothing and tools. Items you can wear, items you can hold, all of which raise or lower certain skills. Exploring Portofino will net you a solid arsenal of fashion to enjoy, though, and it may just be because I put an unhealthy amount of effort into styling my characters when I get the chance, I really don't think there was enough for me here. I wore the same cloak from beginning to end, not because I didn't find others, but because an unfortunately massive portion of the clothing in this game is just, I don't know, silly? I was unhealthily excited to kit Cascade out, but every new addition to my wardrobe would be a silly little mini skirt or a fake wig and mustache. Not that I have anything against mustaches. Even if I found something that looked cool initially, it probably looked a whole lot cooler in my inventory than it did in game. Just a shame, I think. Maybe a little dramatic on my part, but I am who I am. Luckily for me, clothing wasn't the only benefit to exploring the city. Portofino is genuinely remarkable, a whirlwind of secrets and masterfully dense streets, uplifted by a beautiful painterly aesthetic that had me by the balls at every new vista. Home to, seriously, some of the best clutter and detailing I've ever seen in a game. It feels noticeably lived in and unique in presentation. I particularly love the whimsy of kids on roller skates in the bazaar, or the subtle splatter of paint present on almost every surface. Lighting and texture work here is perhaps outdated fidelity-wise, but great care has been taken to embed what fidelity it has in the art style, like the blue aura around shadows. Everything, man, just everything is stylized, down to the way characters move, the peculiar choice to give every character size 4 feet unless they're wearing boots for some reason, and don't get me started on the map and the cute little objective markers for it. Even the music too. Look, Zero Parades has a subtle soundtrack when talking instrumentals, you know, fantastic and varied instrument choice, sound grabs from the environment to make it visceral and thematic, but there are some tracks with added vocals that I wish I could play for you. Oh, and in the end game, if you make a particularly reckless choice, there's a song that plays in the aftermath that is perfect atmosphere, and I'll remember the moment for a long time. The game's soundscape as a whole is no stranger to this unique flair and quality, but the voiceover side of things does seem to suffer. Inconsistency, not quality. I'm sure you've heard, but if you haven't, there are a load of missing voice lines, that don't match the subtitling.
I know about the Boers. I know about hiding. La Luz's invisible aircraft carriers, weaponized nostalgia, microbial microphones, lunar obfuscation program,
and even a character with 2 different voice actors.
Did you know water covers approximately 63% of the world, but the sky covers 100%?
Wrong. The sky is only 98% sky. The other 2% is used.
I imagine the last mishap is a placeholder that hadn't been removed yet, and as of writing this, it seems they've released a patch addressing it, so there's a silver lining there. Unfortunately for me, and many others it seems, they can't exactly patch the narrator out of the game. Though thankfully you can mute just that part of the voiceover, and I did almost immediately.
Punch hard, break metal. Pain, instant and awful, jars through your fingers. We've fucked up a nerve in there somewhere. The hull of the boat looks solid as the door.
It's not that it's horrendous, just overacted and a little bit slow for my taste. I'm sure it'll grow on most of you, but I found myself having to reread the dialogue anyway because I couldn't pay attention to it. While we're on a similar subject, let's talk stability and performance. Specifically, the bugs and glitches part of that conversation. The game runs great, no problems there, but on fucking Jupiter, mate, there were 1, 2, 3 too many reoccurring bugs. The game never crashed, but it may as well have, considering I had to restart it countless times to fix these issues. Sometimes my mouse would stop working in conversations just forever unless I restarted the game. Sometimes the results of a skill check would be permanently stuck in any conversation over the top of a character's portrait too, unless I restarted the game. And sometimes I think they'd had enough of me save scumming because I somehow failed a check with a 97% chance and just disabled saving for me, like I couldn't save at all. And they forgot to implement quick saves, so I was just stuck unless I restarted the game. In the long run, I very clearly dealt with this just fine because I still have great things to say about the game, but my eyes started glazing over with a few choice Cyberpunk 2077 flashbacks, particularly the generational trauma of having to restart a 50 to 100 hour game every 30 fucking minutes because of massive memory leak. Not that this was ever as bad as that, but you get my point. Zaum is very lucky they managed to write a compelling narrative. I might have dropped it otherwise. And since I mentioned it, let's talk about it. I already gave the backstory, but I never quite gave my opinion, and I'm certain the whole world is absolutely lost without it. Anyways, on arrival in Portofino, Herschel finds that everything has already gone horribly wrong. Pseudopod, her double, meaning her operational counterpart, her partner, is incapacitated, unresponsive, effectively dead, or as the game calls it, zeroed out. The only sensible thing to do now is report this, and she does with some difficulty. Her controller, with whom she has a very complicated relationship, orders her to take the next aerotram from Portofino and consider the assignment a failure. Well, the dramatic end to her last mission and a sprinkle of debilitating guilt motivate her to completely ignore the order and take it upon herself to find out what happened to Pseudopod, the only clues being a mysterious red disc played out next to him and the headphones around his neck. What follows is something I've absolutely yearned for since the Phantom Liberty expansion for Cyberpunk 2077. You know, that darker side of spycraft. Not James Bond sensationalism, but like Cold War primitive paranoia with a side of cyberpunkified MK Ultra type shit. Havana Syndrome, the works, man. It's hard to explain the aesthetic, but I know you know what I'm talking about. Massive conspiracies litter this tale, and it goes beyond the physical into the metaphysical and even the supernatural. Some of the wackiest side of Zero Parades is truly fascinating. Zaum's character work is strong throughout, with engaging, if a bit too flowery prose to immerse you in a game style that has to describe more than it shows. I definitely latched on to a few of these characters and cared very deeply about how I might influence them, positively or negatively. But as this game forgoes the party system and keeps Herschel's journey very isolated, as befits a spy to be fair, some of that is understandably lost. At times it can try a little too hard to be silly and clash with its darker tone, but for the most part I was thoroughly engaged, hanging on the branches of every dialogue tree, and much of the comedic relief was well placed. Now it may sound a little contradictory, but in the end, the entire thing, was a missed opportunity. To be clear, I do have a few gripes with the game's ending, with the final mission and how the people involved and the choices you make impact it, but that's not what I'm talking about. The supernatural side of the game, the ghosts and goblins hiding between the lines of the mundane, is not undercooked per se, but criminally underused. As I said before, truly fascinating stuff, but that's all it is. I don't need to know everything. Some mystery is always good, but much of it just fizzles out. On that note, I felt similar about any side quests I discovered. In an effort to cleanly integrate all of of them into the main story, the specifics of the quests themselves seem to fizzle out a bit too. Every single one links back in a way that is satisfying enough in the grand scheme of things, but they funnel into a central conclusion in lieu of some more satisfying smaller scale conclusions. Hopefully you understand what I mean there. You know, it's hard for me to gauge how outcome rich this game is and how much your choices affect them. I'll likely only play it once and can only speak to the illusion of choice. In that regard though, I felt like what I said and did mattered. Bar a few spoiler heavy moments, I did feel like I could control the narrative as much as one person in a world that doesn't wait on you could. Zero Parades for Dead Spies isn't masterful enough to leave you looking like our poor double pseudopod, but even the most determined person couldn't twist it into being a bad game. It is a good game. Mostly great, sometimes amazing. The most important takeaway here is that you will be satisfied enough. Whatever critique is in lament that it couldn't be better, not that it couldn't be good at all. I really enjoyed my time with the game. I truly did. Now, I usually only bring the Waffle Iron out in my flagship reviews, but I thought I'd use my own rating system for each verdict, so it'll make an appearance here. Also because it'll be kind of off color, but also pretty funny to rate a controversy at all, let alone with a cartoon waffle. That aside, Zero Parades for Dead Spies, entirely on its own merits, is fluffy. And because I genuinely cannot get enough of those dark espionage vibes, a dash of syrup too. But if only it were that simple. This is the scary part. For Zero Parades, not for me. For me, it's probably covering the controversy. Look, I have some surprising notes here, but the overall sentiment will be anything but as expected. You know, as I said in the intro, Disco Elysium is one of the best games ever made, and that makes this comparison a tad unfair. I can't in good conscience chastise Zaum for not managing to live up to an expectation like that, but I can tell you why they didn't. We'll start with an easy one. I'd be lying if I said Herschel Wilk wasn't an interesting character, but I'd also be lying if I said she was half as interesting as Harry. Interestingly enough, despite being an amnesiac, he's far less of a blank slate than Herschel is. There's a little bit of that inescapable personality in her. You can avoid expressing it like you can in Disco Elysium, but where Harry always finds a way to shine through, Herschel can be molded into your image. That's not necessarily a bad thing. She's a more impressionable character, and it might be a little easier to roleplay however you wish because of that, but an authored character from the ground up will probably be more memorable. Similarly, her internal voices, being her skills, are also less memorable as a result, but not entirely for the same reason. Disco Elysium makes them sentient. They're not Harry's internal monologue, they bicker with him and with each other. Herschel isn't lucky enough to have that. Though they have personality and are nothing but a boon to her character, they never materialized as people to me, and thus again can't be nearly as memorable. I think as kind of a surprise challenger, Esoteric Ebb takes this one. There are only 6 skills in that game, and splitting the entire human experience into 6 different personalities is a million times easier than 15 plus. It gets a little more complicated when we zoom out beyond our titular characters and take a look at what surrounds them. It may come as a surprise, but I couldn't possibly pick between them. In fact, I'd like to close my eyes and hope the extra privacy results in a little baby between them. Portofino is alive. It is densely cluttered. Filler NPCs populate the streets and make its denizens a part of the spectacle. It is prettier and a joy to explore, but similarly, Revachol's history is alive. The weight of what came before burdens everyone that remains. It is a dying dream imprisoned by brick and stone. Revachol isn't designed to be lively or colorful. A talking tie if I've ever seen one. I appreciate both immensely. I only hope we'll see lessons learned from both approaches. Unfortunately for Zero Parades, Disco Elysium is a master of tone. Zaum isn't incapable, but they wield that weapon with far less precision. That strangely comfortable whiplash between political theory, melancholy, slapstick, or just plain stupidity is left intact throughout both games, but it's a tool for Zero Parades. Disco Elysium genuinely lives and breathes that shit. The silliness of Harry's journey is endlessly surprising because it loops back so cleanly into the larger narrative, and beyond that becomes the most meaningful and emotionally loaded part of it. Comedy in Zero Parades never undercut the rest of it, which is impressive enough, don't get me wrong, but it didn't have that bite, and neither did its political commentary. Disco Elysium was a smarter and more cutting deconstruction of ideology. I don't think this one is much of a deconstruction at all. It was just very competent world building. That's fine, it may even fit better with the whole espionage vibe, but doubtful it could live up to its predecessor. Though, if you'll allow me, before I get to the big disappointment, the big delineation between the two games, there is a part of Zero Parades that doesn't just match its competition, but surpasses it entirely. Zero Parades has dramatically superior gameplay. It's not even close. Morale and health were virtually meaningless in Disco Elysium. I can count each time it ever pressed me as more than a mechanic I strained to remember on one hand, on one finger. Fatigue, anxiety, and delirium are both a threat and a tool throughout the entire game. Those three things are enough to take this round, but even further, the action sequences swing the pendulum towards more innovative gameplay in the genre as a whole. It isn't the perfect answer to Disco Elysium's one-note gameplay, but it's a working one, and building upon it will only yield better and better games. Okay, now for the big one. Zero Parades has a truly fascinating magic to it. I can't really say all that much without spoiling half the game, but trust me when I say that it could have been more interesting than the Pale or the Insulindian Phasmid in Disco Elysium. But it wasn't, because there is no relief. When Harry takes the stage, there is discovery at the end of it all. Not a full explanation to crack the mystery, but something to latch onto. Progress. He discovers the Insulindian Phasmid, proving that there is more to life than we know. Harry investigates a 2mm hole in the world and finds no easy explanation. The equivalent lead up to both of these moments are strong and could be stronger in Zero Parades. The supernatural is intriguing and I was chomping at the bit for more, but the moments themselves are cut in favor of more important things and I couldn't be more disappointed. If anything else, that is how Disco Elysium truly takes the cake. It understands the value of relief, not explanation, but relief and some measure of progress. Even so, I think this is a pretty surprising outcome, and Zero Parades for Dead Spies on the merits of its predecessor is still fluffy, but no dash of syrup this time. And we're not done, of course. Alright, okay. Now, I don't really know nothing, so I'll have to be careful and brief with my recounting of events. I'm not a journalist. I don't know anybody involved, and I can only work from what has been publicly reported. All of that, and I'm sure anyone making it this far into the video will understand the limited information I'm comfortable providing. Regardless, let me begin. Zaum's genesis was more than the founding of a video game studio. Born from a left-leaning Estonian countercultural movement against the traditional arts establishment, it seems there is more personal stake in this dispute. Headed by Martin Luiga, the team at Zaum included studio founder and lead designer Robert Kuvitz, artistic director Alexander Rostov, and head writer Helen Hein-Perret. A few executive producers of note among them include Ilmar Kompas and Denise Havel. Disco Elysium was released in 2019 to critical acclaim, perhaps owing much of that acclaim to a particular creative core, being Kuvitz, Rostov, and Hein-Perret. However, in 2022, Martin Luiga revealed that the three had involuntarily left Zaum, and a tweet by Alexander Rostov himself confirms this the next day. From here on out, things get messy, as both camps have made a few pretty serious allegations. Kuvitz and Rostov allege that now CEO Ilmar Kompas and executive producer Denise Havel fraudulently took control of Zaum and ousted them under false pretenses. Now, all I can say to this is that Denise Havel was convicted of investment fraud back in 2015, which obviously makes it a bit difficult to handwave a similar allegation. On the other side of the aisle, Ilmar Kompas alleges that Kuvitz and Rostov were contributing heavily to Zaum's toxic work environment at the time, by belittling women, humiliating colleagues, and intending to steal IP, among other things. For this, I can say that Zaum's allegations have come from somewhere. Multiple people associated with the studio have described the original leadership as difficult, toxic, and far from blameless with regards to that specific workplace culture. Something was clearly going on, because it's doubtful a controversy like this would arise from a happy-go-lucky workplace. At the very least, we know it wasn't exactly healthy. It doesn't quite stop there. You see, in 2024, a sequel to Disco Elysium codenamed Y12 was binned, as was a DE spin-off and an unnamed sci-fi title. The interesting part is that cancellation cancellation of the DE spin-off on February 15th, 2024 coincides with zaum firing a quarter of their staff, and we love layoffs in this industry, don't we? Though it is worth mentioning that zaum is unionized, and seems to have been the first recognized workplace union in the UK games industry. Zaum's management has also voluntarily recognized this. I've had to leave a whole lot out to condense this down and attempt to remain as impartial as I can, so I apologize if something you deem important didn't make the cut. What is important to me is the answer to this question. What do I do with this information as a consumer and as a reviewer? Well, I can't ignore it. And even in a world where Kuvitz is no saint and Rostov follows suit, I find it really hard to imagine one where zaum is faultless. Thus, it must be acknowledged. I'd feel a little dishonest otherwise. I bought the game because I appreciate the art of video games. I love Disco Elysium, and though much of the talent has fled the nest, they are not the only people that can make a good game. In that same vein, the people that made this good game aren't liable for the sins of their fathers, if you catch my drift. I think it is my job to appreciate their artistic output all the same. And that is exactly why I cannot condone leaving negative reviews on the basis that zaum fucking sucks, therefore this game does too. I also don't think leaving a negative review because of the controversy, regardless of the game's merit, is all that useful either. If you land squarely against zaum in this dispute, by all means, do not buy the game, and by all means, persuade other people not to buy the game. But I think all art deserves to be reviewed fairly, and it is not only Ilmar Compass or Tanis Havel that we're hurting when we let their actions dictate how we receive the effort of an entire studio. If you boycott Starbucks by, well, not going, do you hurt the employee? Probably not. But if you boycott Starbucks by ordering and paying for a fucking triple split venti mocha matcha 13 pumps of caramel, whatever the fuck, and you throw it back in the employee's face regardless of how accurate the order was, well, I just don't think that's helpful, right? You should figure out for yourself whether you can in good conscience buy this video game. And in light of this controversy, a clean recommendation is difficult for me to give. And yeah, look, it's probably a bit absurd for me to use a waffle to rate the game again based on this information, but it's kind of funny, so I'll do it anyway. 0 parades for Dead Spies in light of the controversy is spongy, I guess. Hey, if you're still with me, I'm James, and if you happen to enjoy the video, please do consider dropping a sub. I promise I am in it for the long run. Thanks!